Well, thank you for braving the cold to come out to learn a little bit about solar and batteries. As Kelly said, I'm Kate, and I work for Solar Savers. We're a not-for-profit that was set up by local governments to assist their residents in getting kind of reliable information and reliable quotes to install solar systems. And now we work across 13 councils. And so how we support residents to do that is through the support of local government and also through going through extensive public tendering processes to select installers that tick the boxes for local government and for what their residents would like. So we have a focus on quality products, fair pricing, the safety of installations is really important, as well as the longevity of the organisation and their customer service. We also complete additional compliance and OHS audits in addition to, the typical electrical compliance audits and energy regulating audits that happen across all solar installations. So 5% of our solar installations will have additional OH&S and energy compliance audits. And finally, if you have questions, you come to me. I work in a small team of 3 who are all absolutely delightful to deal with. And if you call us, it comes straight to me. If you email us, it comes straight to me as well. So any questions that pop up along your way, if you can't have one of the engineers or electricians answer it, you can come to me and I can advocate on your behalf. And I guess another way that we assist residents is through hosting sessions like this. And so now I'll pass over to Andrew to chat through everything solar and batteries. Thank you.
Just a bit of an introduction on rooftop solar in Australia to start with. It is now a pretty mature industry. Like, if you went back 20 years ago, it was a very different scene. So rooftop solar then was really more for someone who was building a house out in the bush. There were no power lines to the house. It would cost tens of thousands of dollars to have the power lines connected. Then you'd go off-grid. You have solar, batteries, probably a generator. So that was most of the solar electricity that was going in back in the day. Now it's all about grid-connected solar, well, mostly. So we're already up to about 1/3 of homes in Australia with solar, which includes all the apartments. So that's a pretty good number. We're a bit behind that in Victoria, like Queensland and South Australia have a higher uptake. And the chart that I've included here is for a specific day. It was a high solar output sunny day when what those lines show is the percentage of electricity generation in the state that came from rooftop solar. So that's not even including the the solar farms out in the countryside, and there are a lot of those as well. So there are days when rooftop solar can, especially around the middle of the day when it's sunny, can make up a fairly high proportion of state electricity consumption, and it gets shared over the interconnectors in between states as well. So over a whole year, including night times, etc., we're talking about 12% of grid energy. So that might sound fairly low, but something a lot of people don't realise is households are only a minority of the grid energy. I think it's only about 1/3. So about 2/3 of the electricity going through the grid is for businesses, industry, manufacturing, all that stuff. So if you think about households and how much they're contributing, it's already pretty good. And if you look at our solar industry compared to overseas, we're actually really lucky that we've got access to, it's pretty easy to get solar installed and it's relatively affordable as well. So in the United States, for example, their paperwork costs are a lot higher, and apparently their rooftop installers are not as productive either. The installers here do actually work really hard. All right, so how does solar work? So we have the panels up on the roof. So a typical system would be around 15 panels. So we're talking 6.6 kilowatts of solar. So a kilowatt is a unit of power, like a horsepower. It's actually a bit more than a horsepower. And panels, they're glass, aluminium, got some silicon cells, got usually plastic on the back to keep it waterproof. And yeah, so they last a long time. We're talking 25 years. Most of them have product warranties that long these days. So they're generating electricity from the sunshine falling on them. It goes down a cable into the inverter, which is usually a box on the wall somewhere, either in the garage or on the side of the house is most common. And that's changing the electricity that comes out of the solar panels into the type of electricity that your appliances in your house use. So your 240 volt AC, alternating current. You've probably heard of that. So that's sending that electricity into your switchboard. So all those little safety switches in the box. And then it's sending them to your appliances. So your washing machine, dishwasher, lights, computers. Your appliances have the first call on electricity that's being generated by your solar panels. If you're generating more than what your appliances use, then the surplus gets automatically pushed out to the poles and wires in the grid. And you earn a little bit of money for that, which is great. If it's cloudy or your appliances are using a lot of power at the moment, you've turned on the vacuum cleaner or something like that, then if you have a shortfall of how much power you're using compared to what's coming from the solar panels, then that shortfall is automatically made up by power coming from the poles and wires. So you've got two electricity sources now. You've got your solar system and the grid, and they work together to balance out. So where should you put the panels? The good news is it's not critical. You don't have to choose the most perfect position that's just like in the right spot. These days, panels are relatively cheap, so just basically as long as the roof is sunny, then you're good to go. North-facing panels would work best around this time of year because the sun's low in the sky in the north, so you get a good angle onto the panels if they're facing north. West-facing is great in summer because summer sun goes high in the sky and then it sets in the west. So if it's 7 p.m. in the evening, a hot summer day, the sun's still up there in the sky beating down on you, and you've probably got your aircon going hard, then that's a time when it's great to have solar generating, and the west-facing panels will be pointing at that evening summer sun, especially because a lot of the electricity plans these days they're more expensive in the evening, especially from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. So if you do have a big air conditioner, like a whole house air conditioner, ducted air conditioner system running on a summer evening, then that's going to be using a lot of power at expensive electricity rates. So that's a great time to be generating. If you have some panels east and some panels west, that's a great option. So the ones facing east will do better on a summer morning. West, we already talked about. So you can spread out your generation into the morning hours and the evening hours. Still doesn't help you when the sun's actually set, or before it rises. Not much we can do about that, except batteries, which we'll come to later. South-facing panels, they do generate less over the whole year. Especially in winter. But in summer, they can actually still do okay. And because in summer, the sun actually rises in Melbourne. It rises south of the equator. So, south of us. So it does. You do get direct sun on south-facing panels in summer. And if you have a really overcast day, like you know those times when you look up at the sky and you go, where's the sun? And you actually don't know where the sun is because it's so cloudy, like you've just got this glow coming from the whole sky. Well, in that case, it doesn't really matter which way the panels are pointing. So at those cloudy times, what you really want to generate useful power is just as many panels as possible. So yeah, it doesn't matter that much these days, just a good sunny roof. The tilt of the panels, again, it's not that critical. You don't really want them super flat because water goes on them and dust and bird poo, and if they're super flat, then it doesn't wash off very well. So at least 10 degrees is a good idea if that's achievable. Okay, so most people are installing solar panels for economic reasons. There are also environmental reasons and a little bit of self-sufficiency, that type of stuff. But if we talk about the cost, so that 15-panel system, typical size, 6.6 kilowatts, you're looking at around $6,500 to $8,500, you know, just typical prices. You can get really budget bargain basement systems. You have to be a little bit careful because if the price is that good, then probably some corners are getting cut somewhere. And if you go for like the really premium brands, you know, it's like the cars. You've got Toyotas and you've got Hyundais and Volvos and Mercedes. So if you go for the Mercedes brand, then it's probably going to cost more than the Hyundai brand. But you also have other factors like if it's a tiled roof, it'll probably, most installers would charge a bit more for a tiled roof compared to a normal metal roof like a ColourBond. And the reason is how the panels attach. So I've put up a picture there. So you've got this stainless steel bracket. So it's like a sort of a L shape, or even a, what do you call it, like a Z shape or something. So it's got a plate that screws onto the timbers underneath the tiles, and then it comes up and it goes around the bottom of the tile and then comes up again. So yeah, it's stainless steel, it's metal, that's an extra cost, and it's also more labour involved. Because the other thing that the installers will do, if they're good installers and they're doing what they should do, if you've got good eyes, you might be able to see on that tile that's been lifted to put the bracket under there, a little bit of the tile's been ground away, like there's a little notch in the tile, so that when it sits down onto that steel piece, it'll go back to its position. It isn't going to be resting up. It isn't going to be held up a little bit by the steel bracket. So that's to help with the waterproofing. So yeah, there's a bit of labour to remove a little bit of material out of those tiles so they sit flush again. Second story, you may have special equipment like a cherry picker, like this one, some additional costs. Where the cables go. So the cables come down from the panels down to your inverter on the wall. So they have to get there somehow. So inside the wall cavity, or maybe in a plastic conduit outside the wall cavity. So if it's a tricky wall to run the cables, then that's more labour again, and it might bump up the cost a bit. Oh, another one I haven't got on the slide is if you've got your switchboard with those safety switches in it, if that's really old and if it's got something like asbestos behind it, and they have to, there's no more room for an extra safety switch for the solar, and they have to upgrade the switchboard, then the standards, the Australian standards for installing a switchboard say they have to bring it all up. They have to make it all comply with the regulations. So if they start working on that switchboard, then if they have to make it all comply and they have to deal with the old stuff behind it, then that can be an additional cost as well. So in most cases, that's not going to happen, but it's just something to be aware of. If you do get a quote that's higher than like what these averages are here, those might be some of the reasons, or it might be just just a high price they're giving you. So, yeah, it's always a good idea to get more than one quote. Same as if you were doing any sort of home improvement, like installing a deck, or you're getting some windows replaced or something, then you would normally get more than one quote. So I'd say, yeah, and do the same with solar too. Now, with sizing a solar system, so I'm talking about like a 15-panel solar size. That's the most common in the market, and there's reasons for that. So a 5 kilowatt inverter is sort of the biggest inverter that you can usually put on without the installer having to do much paperwork with the electricity company. If it's 5 kilowatts or less, then it's pretty easy to get approval from the solar installer to install that and send that power into the grid. And then if you've got a 5 kilowatt inverter, then the maximum number of panels you can put on is about 15, or up to that 6.6 kilowatt. So you might be thinking, hang on, if I've got a 5 kilowatt inverter and I put 6.6 kilowatts of panels, then aren't we going to be wasting some of the power? And you're kind of right if you are thinking that, but only some of the time. And because 6.6 kilowatts of solar, that's its rated capacity. And it's rated under sort of laboratory conditions. So when they tested in the laboratory, the light's coming from the perfect angle, and it's a nice bright light, and the temperatures are good. But most of the time in the real world, we don't have that. So the angles will be off. It'll be not a very good angle of the sunbeams, or there'll be clouds, or there'll be a bit of dirt on the panel, or it'll be hot weather, and panels actually don't like hot weather so much. They don't do quite as well. So a 6.6 kilowatt system, like most of the time, it's probably be generating more like 2, 3, 4, 5 kilowatts. It's not going to be generating more than 5 kilowatts of power very often. So it's only when you have that really nice sunny day with the sun in the right position, yeah, then you would be wasting a bit of power. But the rest of the time, it's actually useful to have those extra panels to increase your generation. So that's why this is the most common size, oversized. It is common to have higher panel power than inverter power. And yeah, as you go bigger, then your cost per panel reduces because the installer's up on the roof anyway. They've already done the quote. They've already done the design. It's probably still the same number of cables. So yeah, it's economies of scale. If on the other hand, if you go to a small system, then yeah, sure, it'll cost less, but per panel, it'll actually cost more, just because of those economies of scale. Okay, I might have to speed up a bit. It's already 7 o'clock. All right, so that's a cost. Now, how much are you going to save on your bills? Well, a common sort of number might be around $1,000 or $800 per year. It depends on the size of the system. It depends on, is it a sunny roof or is there shade over it? What electricity prices are you paying? They're probably going up soon. There's been some changes in the regulation, and the default offers for electricity plans have been allowed to be increased. Feed-in tariffs. Okay, so I mentioned that when you're generating a surplus of power and you're sending some power into the electricity grid, you get paid a little bit. And the amount you get paid is the feed-in tariff. So that's per kilowatt hour. So that's a unit of energy. If you look on your electricity bill, it'll tell you how many kilowatt hours of electricity you imported from the grid, like in the last 3 months. And you'll be charged for what you're importing from the grid. you might get charged maybe 25 cents, 30 cents, maybe more. It might depend on what time of day. Once you get solar, you're going to have an extra line on your bill somewhere that tells you, in addition to what you imported from the grid, how much you exported, how much you fed into the grid in that 3 months. And so that might be, 1,000 kilowatt hours or something like that. And it'll tell you how much the electricity company is paying you for that. So that might be 5 cents per kilowatt hour, something like that. It actually changes every year in Victoria. There's the Essential Services Commission does an analysis and works out a fair price, and that's a minimum level for the feed-in tariff. You might be wondering, how can it be fair for us to only get 5 cents for what we put into the system when we're paying, say, 30 cents for what we get out of the system? Yeah, well, unfortunately, it actually is kind of fair. I might not try and explain it now, but there are valid reasons why the feed-in tariff is only around 5 cents or so. But yeah, even though it's a small amount, it does add up. Like, if you think about summer days when hour after hour you're sending that electricity into the grid, even for a small amount, it does make a useful contribution on the economics of the system. So if we assume that we're not going into expensive debt to buy a solar system, if we're paying it out of savings or paying it out of a mortgage or something like that, which is not so expensive, then you're probably looking at a payback period of around 6 to 8 years. That might sound fairly long, like, oh, that's a long time to wait, 6, 8 years. And yeah, if you're about to move house in the next few years, then you might rethink putting on solar, really. There's an argument that it might increase the value of your house when you go to sell it, but a lot of real estate agents would say a lot of buyers don't really care, unfortunately. So, yeah, you might think that takes a long time to pay back, but if you are staying in your house that long, then it actually works out as a pretty good economic return. Like, if you convert that over to an equivalent interest rate, you're not going to find a low risk financial investment that would be as good as that. So, yeah, disclaimer: I'm not a financial advisor, but so please speak to one. But yeah, it's pretty clear that if you can get a 6 to 8 year payback, then that's pretty attractive. And every year after that, you're just your system's paid itself off. You're just receiving those savings into the future. And you don't pay tax on bill savings. If you put your money in a financial investment, then you're going to have to pay tax on that. Disclaimer: I'm not an accountant. But yeah, so speak to those people. But it's pretty clear that it's a good investment. Just as long as you've got a sunny roof and you're staying in your house for a while, and you're not going into really expensive finance. Another factor that influences your payback is when you use most of your electricity. So solar will work best, you'll get your best sort of savings if you're using electricity around the middle of the day, so it's coming straight off your solar panels. If you don't use much in the middle of the day and you're consuming all your electricity at night, then yeah, it's not going to be quite as good for you economically. If we step away from the economics for a second and just consider environmental aspects, one question people have sometimes is, well, it's got to take a lot of energy to produce the glass and the aluminium and the solar cells and transport those panels from China or Taiwan or Singapore, wherever they're coming from. So how long does it take for a solar panel to generate to cover that energy that was required to manufacture and transport it? And I've looked into this, and it's about 1 year So if the panels last 25 years, then really that's pretty negligible. So when I say negligible, I mean that's a good result. It's generated that energy really fast. Okay, so let's have a think about who are the companies you're dealing with when you're buying solar. So there's actually usually two separate companies. So the company you're buying your solar system off is called the solar retailer. So they're buying the solar panels, the inverters, the racking, the cables, the switches, all the little bits and pieces. They're buying that wholesale in bulk, and they're designing a solar system specifically for your home, and they're taking responsibility for the deal. But then they're subcontracting the work to an installation company. So those are the tradespeople who are actually up on the roof and in there with your switchboard and doing all that stuff. So they're electricians, or at least one of them on the job has to be. Electrician who's also accredited as a solar installer with the Clean Energy Council. So as well as doing the manual work, they're also arranging the work to be inspected by an inspector who comes later, and they're arranging for the grid connection. And because you're actually connecting a little power generation station into the grid. So who's the main distributor around here? Is it Gemini? Yeah. So Gemini has to approve what you're connecting, because we don't want people messing with the grid too much in silly ways. So the installer handles all that side of things as well. Yep. So the two logos there. The accredited installer is for the tradesperson. So that's an individual qualification for a person. And then the New Energy Tech approved seller. So that's for the solar retailer, and that's saying that they've signed up to a code of conduct for how they deal with consumers. And there's a bunch of checking compliance around that as well. This is actually a new scheme. Used to be called the Approved Solar Retailer, but it's switching over now, and it's broadening from just solar to be batteries as well and other things. So the solar retailer is the is the one that you're really choosing most of the time. So how do you choose a good one? It's actually quite hard to advise on this topic. And the reason why I find it hard to advise is because of the subcontracting that I mentioned previously. So like if you're looking for a builder or a carpenter, or other sort of people who might do work on your home, then reviews and word of mouth. You might have a friend and you say, oh, you got a great job on your new deck. Who did you use? Oh yes, we used these people. They were really good. So yeah, you can do that with solar, but the tricky thing is, because they're usually subcontracting the work to an installer, they may have variability in the quality of the installers that they have on their books. So your friend might have been lucky to have a good installer turn up, but then you could be lucky, or you could be not so lucky with the team that actually shows up to do the work. So probably one of the key things is a retailer that manages their contracting installers quite closely. So that's one of the things I would be asking the retailer about is, do you use your own staff to do the installs, or do you subcontract the work to someone else? If they subcontract, then ask about the specific team that's going to turn up. Have you been working with these people for a long time? Do they do good work? When they schedule the appointment, ask again, double check about the team, which is actually coming. Just try and get some confidence that the company you're dealing with is managing the situation well. They haven't just put out some random call for anyone to turn up and do the job. One good way to do it is to go through a trusted source. For example, Solar Savers, as we just heard about in the previous presentation. So they've got a system of vetting their solar retailers and making sure that they do have good processes. Okay, now, so solar systems, most people have a great experience. Everything goes smoothly, the system works, and they can monitor it, and they're all happy. A few things to watch out for, though, as you go through this process. If the salesperson is pressuring you to say, oh, you have to sign up right now, well, then that's a danger sign. Why is it so critical that I sign up right now? They may have some story about rebates that are just about to run out. It's not really the case at the moment. So, just watch out for that. Another thing that's happened sometimes is the quote says one model of panel, and then what actually gets turned up on the job is a slightly different model of panel. So if you can check for that with the tradies who actually turn up, what is this product? What's the model number? I think that's a good idea. And sometimes that's an honest sort of mistake or an honest change that's happened, because the company importing the panels, well, they used to import the one that you quoted for, but they don't import that, and we're giving you the newer model. I mean, so that might be fine, but it's good to check. The person who's actually accredited as a solar installer, are they there on the job the whole time, or most of the time at least, because they're meant to be? System design. So if the system was meant to have panels on the east and west side, check with the tradies. Yep, you are putting them there and there, right? Because there have been cases where they actually put them somewhere else because maybe they didn't quite understand the design, or it was a bit easier for them, or maybe the design wasn't actually realistic. Like the designer put the panels somewhere where they weren't going to fit, so they've moved them. So yeah, just check that what's going to happen is actually what you expected was going to happen. One of the reasons why designs are sometimes not fully realistic is because if we go back, 10, 20 years ago, it was common for installers or retailers to come out on site when they do a quote. And they'd do the measuring, they'd look at the switchboard, they'd put their head up and look in the roof space. So they're really aware of the practicalities of your specific home. Nowadays, quotes are usually just from aerial photography. They might ask you to take a photo of your switchboard that you send to them. So it's all usually done remotely, which is great for keeping costs down and productivity, but it's not as good as someone actually coming out on site. So if you do have an experience where they're going to come out on site to do a quote, then that's actually a really good feature of their service. And then at the end of the job, you should have a system that works, and also that they've explained to you how you can tell if it's working properly. So some inverters, they have a little screen on it with a button, and you can press the button and you say, oh, yep, it's generating 3 kilowatts. Yeah, it's a bit cloudy. Yep, that sounds about right. Or, oh, look, it's generating 6.5 kilowatts. I've never seen one that high before. Oh, yeah, okay, it's really sunny. The sun's in the right angle. Great. Some inverters don't have a little screen on it anymore. But what almost all systems have is the ability to report their generation on the internet. So you can go on your internet browser and you'll have a link, and you can see a screen that will tell you how much your solar system is generating now, and also like a chart of what it did yesterday and the last 7 days, that kind of thing. So yeah, before the solar installer goes, you should check that all of that is working. And to make that work, your solar inverter needs to communicate to the internet. So probably through your internet router, your Wi-Fi. And yeah, they're also meant to provide you with some paperwork, like the manuals and warranties and all that stuff. Okay, grid constraints. So it's generally not a problem around here, but especially if you go out into the Dandenongs, for example, a bit further out in the hills, areas where there's not so many houses in close distances from each other, then you have cases where your solar system, it can't actually generate as much as it should generate because it's trying to send lots of power into the grid, and the grid has some bottlenecks. It has some constraints. The poles and wires have difficulty accepting all of the power that's being sent out. So yeah, look, I might not go into this slide in detail in the interest of time, but if we have questions about it, I can come back to this. And if you've heard of voltage rise, then that's one symptom of these types of problems, and also export limits. But around here, it really shouldn't be much of a problem. Okay, special cases would be heritage overlays. So if your home is classed as being in a heritage area, then there's some special rules about what you're allowed to do that's visible from the street. So the council can advise you on that one. If you've got trees or your neighbour's second story or something like that, which is putting a shadow over your panels for significant times of day, for significant months of the year, then that can have an impact on how much your solar system generates. And sometimes it's a disproportionate impact. So you might think, oh, look, I've got this rows of panels and the shade's it's only coming up, the panel's that big, the shade's only coming up that much from the bottom of the panel. That's not going to do much. Well, actually, that's one of the cases where it can have a big impact. So just be aware of that, and if there is shade around, then really talk to the solar installers about that issue, and retailer. If you've got a shared roof, so for example, a row of units that are next to each other, which all have the same roof, then you've probably got a body corporate, an owner's corporation. So you're not free to just go and mess with the roof yourself. You have to get permission from the other owners of the other units next to you. So another thing to be aware of. Oh, and the other one I've already mentioned. If your switchboard or your household wiring is ancient, and then that can cause problems as well with the solar installation. Rebates. So there's two levels of rebates. Subsidies, like financial assistance to install solar. So there's a federal rebate, a small technology certificate. So that's the easy one. So that's everyone gets it. It's included in all the quotes. It's significant. I think it might. If we didn't have that, then the solar prices might be maybe add an extra quarter on top of what they are. Would it be about that? And it's gradually phasing out. So by 2030, it will be zero. So each year, it's just reducing a little bit, which is good. We don't want the government to be subsidising things forever, I guess. The industry is maturing. It can probably stand on its own 2 feet. And then there's the state government through Solar Victoria. So they're giving a rebate of $1,400, and on top of that, you can get an interest-free loan for $1,400. So that's pretty good. How long that's going to last for is a bit less clear, I guess, compared to the STC rebates. It'll depend on state governments and elections and all that kind of stuff. And there are eligibility criteria. So I think it's based on income levels and property values. So you can have a look on the Solar Victoria website for details on that one. And so if you're looking at quotes or, standard prices, like the prices I was showing on a previous slide, like the costs, usually the STC rebate is built into that because everyone gets it. But the Solar Victoria rebate is usually not included in those prices because only some people get them. Okay, batteries. So what can they do? They can provide power in a blackout. That's one of the benefits. But I've said may instead of do because it's not guaranteed that all batteries are going to do that. It depends how it's on the specs of the battery and how it's installed in your home. So if you do want to run appliances during a blackout, then be very clear with the installer that is a requirement. And when they install it, you can ask them to actually show you how that operates. So you can flick the switch off for your electricity from the grid, and they can actually show you what appliances it's going to run, like at the end of the job when they're handing it over to you. There's some differences there. It's not just a yes or no. It's like, is it going to change over the power immediately? So if you've got an old desktop computer, it'll just keep running, or will you have a blackout for 10 seconds or 20 seconds or something? The grid goes down and then you have a delay before the battery kicks in. Another one is, if you have a blackout that goes overnight and into the next day, is your battery going to be able to charge up from solar while you still have a blackout? So some can, some can't. So that's another thing to ask about. Apart from blackout backup, batteries, I think we all are aware that with our energy transition at the moment, we've got fossil fuels closing down, we've got wind and solar. Energy storage needs to be part of that solution. So if you want to do your bit to be part of that future, then that may be a reason for some people why they want to have a battery. And on top of that, there's some economic benefits. So let's say maybe $700 a year of extra saving on top of what your solar would have normally given you without a battery. It's going to depend on the size of the battery and a bunch of other things, but let's take that as an example. So typical battery size, 10 kilowatt hours up to 15 kilowatt hours, around that kind of size. Prices have not come down as much as what we were hoping if we were looking at this 8 years ago, which I was, making predictions about how prices would come down, and unfortunately it hasn't quite worked out that way. So they're still looking at about $1,000 per kilowatt hour. So adding the battery, you may be paying $10,000, $15,000, and depending on the system. So that's more than the solar system itself. So the battery, if you're looking at solar plus a battery, then the battery is the relatively expensive part, and it's providing less bill savings than the solar does. So yeah, if you add the battery, you will end up with more bill savings, but overall, it's probably going to take you longer to achieve payback on your solar battery system than if you just got the solar panels by themselves. So for that reason, it's still probably a niche product, I would say. It's not like, oh yeah, just get a battery without thinking about it. If you want a battery, then be very clear on why you want it and what sort of benefits you want to get out of it. So general usage for a battery, It's going to be charging up from solar, from your excess solar around the middle of the day. So some of that power that you would have been exporting to the grid at, say, 5 cents per kilowatt hour value, instead that's going into the battery. And then in the evening, when you've got a shortfall, instead of buying electricity from the grid at 30 cents, you're just discharging it out of the battery. So that's the usual idea. A few practicalities. There are some rules on where they can be installed. And one of the reasons is that batteries can be a fire issue. Like if a fire starts somewhere else in your house and it reaches the battery, then it might burn. And potentially, if there's an electrical fault inside the battery, then that could be an issue as well. So, yeah, where it can be installed, there are some rules about that. Adding a battery later, it can be done. So if you're thinking, yes, I want solar, I'm not sure about the battery yet, that's okay. You just go ahead and put the solar in, and then you can have a battery added later. But it is good to think about where it might go, and you could talk to the solar retailer about that, or installer. They do degrade over time, not as fast as a mobile phone battery. I think we all know mobile phone batteries don't last as long as we would like them to, but these batteries do have much better sort of management of their temperatures and discharges and charges, so they do last longer. You'd probably expect a lifespan of 10 years, maybe 15 years. Yeah, there's been some testing done by the Battery Test Centre in Canberra, which has found that some of their batteries haven't lasted as long as what they would have expected, but their testing was pretty harsh. So yeah, it's a bit hard to be definitive about this one, but in general, a solar battery, you're probably charging it and discharging it maybe 50% or to 80% of its capacity every day. So that's a reasonably sort of solid workout for a battery to do that day after day after day. They're not 100% efficient, they're 90% efficient roughly. So you do lose a bit of your energy. So if you're charging it up, then you don't get quite as much out again. If you put 10 kilowatt hours in, you'll only get 9 kilowatt hours out. And there are alternatives to storing energy, so surplus solar energy. If you've got a hot water tank that runs off electricity, like a old style resistive electric hot water tank, or the newer style ones called heat pumps, which work like a reverse cycle air conditioner and are much more efficient. Either of those can, if you set them to heat up their water around the middle of the day, then if you've got enough solar to cover that power, then yeah, you're using it like a battery. You're heating your water directly off the excess sunshine on your panels, which is a pretty good option, and it's a lot cheaper than a battery too. And electric vehicles. So it looks like we're coming to a wave of electric vehicles in the next 2 or 3 years probably. I think in the UK, they had a month recently of 25% of new sales were electric. So we're behind them, but it probably is coming. So if you can charge up your electric vehicle during the day, then yeah, same thing. You're using that free or almost free sunshine directly, which is a great thing to do. I might move quickly on this one because the sort of, if you just skip to the bottom there, yeah, it's not worth it, except special cases. You're better off to keep your grid connection and work with it. Sure, add solar, add a battery if you want, but yeah, around here, you'd keep your grid connection unless you have some very specific needs. All right, that's my presentation. Time was pretty good.